Hello, welcome to the Square Base Show with your host, Rob and Val. In this video, I'm going to give you a roadmap because 2025 has been revealed.
Okay. 2025. What is on the horizon of the old world?
Well, yeah. So this is just fresh off the reviews or the reveals, sorry, at the Las Vegas Open. Although weirdly, not actually at the Las Vegas Open, recorded in Nottingham and then played at the Las Vegas Open. Very weird, kind of review. So Old World is in an interesting place. Let's kind of start like where we started and then get to where we're getting to, because Old World was released January 2024 and they said, hey, we're going to be releasing 9 armies. 9 armies. Well, they actually released all the armies, didn't they? They were like, we're releasing all of the armies. Here are all the rules, and then we're going to release 9 additional books over the course of the next question mark. I think that we did get a question mark over the next question mark, right? Because they were like 9 more books, and you're like, okay, cool, all right. Like how long? 7 years? 1 year? 2 years? Then obviously they launched with 2 of the 9 Tomb Kings of Bretonnia. Then quickly followed by Orcs and Goblins. These are all Arcane journals. Then we got Dwarfs. Then we got Warriors just before Christmas of 2024. Summertime, sorry. And then we've just in January had Empire, which, and then we're about to look at the roadmap now, which doesn't actually leave us with a lot towards the end of the year. So let's kind of do, what we're going to do is talk about what we're going to see, but we're going to mainly, after we've done that, we're going to have a quick chat at the end about like, what the hell, how long until a new edition, what a new edition might look like. So I think that's a good conversation to kind of, because
this roadmap is Blues Brothering itself off of an unbuilt overpass, right? Because this roadmap is we're a year and a half deep, and right now all we have is an empty beyond what we knew was coming, and there's been no hints at campaign books or whatever else we could speculate might happen. But you're at a year and a half into what Games Workshop comfortably does as 3-year cycles. So if we think it's still a 3-year cycle, the second half of it is a big empty box, so we can have a little fun.
Yeah, it's absolutely blank. You're right. Let's just touch on it. Of the 6 Arcane journals that have been out so far, is there one that was your personal favorite? And again, everyone watching this, let us know in the comments below. And also, what kind of impact do you think that they had on, like, reinvigorating is a weird word. Orc and Goblin Tribe book, reinvigorating Orc and Goblins, the game had only been out about 3 months. So that's a hard thing. What do you think the impact of these Arcane journals has been?
So I think the impact of the Arcane journals is largely taking these changes that are old and providing remixes for them. So, and that's both with new units that they create. So a lot of times they've been creating kit bashed units, which is really cool, or just different paint job type units that get different rules along a certain theme. And I think what that really has done is, for a lot of, if the intended audience out of the gates were old, what did the marketing team say?
They
like,
literally didn't they call them,
not for new gamers?
Did they call them like old grumblers or something? They even grognards. They unironically used the term grognards in a Warhammer community article. That was it.
So if the assumption is your audience has seen it and done it, and you're just giving them models that they probably already own, the Arcane journals have done a super good job of saying, well, here's a cool theme, here's some usually good rules to give that army a vibe. Here's a smaller army list out of the grand army potential for unit selection, but within that you get a really strong theme and a totally different imagined theater of the mind experience. So like for me, the one that really crushed that, knocked it out of the box, was Orc and Goblin Tribes. You had you had the Troll Horde, which is thematically like very, very different from the Grand Army. And then you've got is it Nomads?
Yeah, Nomads.
Oh my God. Anyway, the cavalry option. And both of those are like really fun, and I would say skewed versions of the Grand Army, but nonetheless, they are totally different armies. If you were to build those out, even if you had an orc and goblin army, you might have a unit of trolls. You might have, a unit of boar boys or whatever, but it gave you a reason to go out and, build a new army or theme it in a different direction. And so when the Arcane Journals hit, that's the kind of thing that you get out of it, which is I think really cool. And also Bretonia, I thought, was really, really cool with their Errantry Crusade and the guys in the Badlands there and the Border Princes. So I don't know. I think honestly the style of the Arcane Journals has been one of the true highlights of Warhammer the Old World, despite some of our salt around the Empire one and half of the Chaos one. And I'm hoping they, return to form with High Elves, and certainly they got lots of opportunity for cool stuff with the other ones that they've announced too.
Yeah, and if this is one of the first times you've tuned into any sort of old world content, you got to remember that this is whenever they release those Arcane Journals, is also when they would be releasing the new miniatures. As an example, yes. Obviously, we're about to get the High Elf release, and we've just done a video. Go back and watch it, where we talk about the High Elf miniatures that are going to be released alongside. Because even though these armies are returning, we don't know what format they're returning or how much additional stuff they're returning with, which I think is actually super interesting. So we kind of looking forward. We know that High Elves are getting released, and I think, obviously I could be wrong, but I think we might even see some new additional kits to the two that have just been announced along with this. Maybe there's a question mark around that. We did see Empire have a couple of waves. In their kind of previews, and maybe we'll see some made to orders as well. There's a bunch of very famous long-standing characters that could potentially, Tyrion and Teclis as an example, that could also be released. So that would be huge. There's a lot in that for High Elves. So still there's a big question mark around that. But the roadmap is really excitingly at least it's given us 3 steps in the future. But we're going to talk about the final and third step in a separate video.
And a mini.
Yes. We could talk about the mini. So, should we talk about the Beastmen? So Beastmen have been announced to be the next army. This is an army you're not super hot on?
No, I'm the Beastmen. I have a Beastmen army, obviously, because I'm gross and I can't help myself. But it just sits. I'm looking at it right now. You poor guys, you poor stinky Beastmen. But yeah, for whatever reason, it just doesn't sing. It probably sings to me the least of all of the factions of the old world and of Warhammer Fantasy. But that doesn't mean it's not cool. There are definitely some big time lovers of Beastmen out there. And rightly so. They're drunk. They hang out in the woods, and they're actually like one of the primary, it's like orcs and goblins and beastmen are kind of the primary foes of humans in the old world. They are never that far away. So it is actually a really important faction for the setting.
Yeah, super important faction for the setting. And I think this is where, so I'm showing on screen now the super cool new sculpt that they've shown off. So this is this is Crawlmore, the Prophet of Ruin. And interestingly, maybe this is just an old world thing now. We've got our wizard and we have our little familiar that goes alongside it. We've seen this with the Empire wizards. Feels like this is a thing we might see going forward, which is a super cool thing, I reckon.
Yeah, they're nice little pieces. They don't have a place in the game right now, so that's something maybe for the future. Maybe familiars actually get rules. Back in the day too, it's a bit of a callback. Back in the day, like the old metal wizards always came with a familiar, like a little pewter familiar.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a callback to an old Citadel thing. They're all very, very cool and evocative. And this blind prophet is pretty dope. Oh man, I just looked at the details on his staff. There's some gnarly stuff on there.
Yeah, it's super grim. What's really fun as well is we've noticed that the art contained in the original release books for the Grand Armies also features some of these models or artwork of these things that eventually become models, which is very, very cool. So that's been fun. But Beastmen is interesting because Beastmen was, up until literally last summer, a supported range, even though very few limited new kits added to it over the course of Age of Sigmar's life. So 10 years, they were active kits that you could buy and play with. So most of those returning is an obvious one. But I think what gets really interesting is where we maybe move outside of that, because there's actually like a long and storied history of there being some pretty weird and gnarly chaos models and chaos beastmen stuff especially as you were saying earlier, from the Storm of Chaos.
Well, I think Storm of Chaos is where you got the or maybe I'm mixing it up with the Albion campaign, if those were two different things. Regardless, let us know in the comments, light me up. However, there were some definitely minis from that era of Famir and some mist shrouded weirdos as well that they had launched.
The big news here, like Val said, is Famir. So if you were keeping up with Warhammer Fantasy Battle or early Age of Sigmar, which is kind of a weird time because some of the stuff that got into pre-production during the end of Warhammer Fantasy Battle's life kind of got brought into early AOS. Famir was one of those sculpts, and I know for a fact if they're willing to go into the drawer and bring out that Bretonnian Lord, the pretty much fully realized Famir-based units that we saw sculpted by, I think it was Trish who ended up doing them, or it might have been Keith, but either way, they were sculpted towards the end of 8th edition's life, the beginning of Age of Sigmar. So there's a potential to add Zotes, Famir, and a bunch of other stuff.
Interesting. So there was sort of like like basically an
unreleased set.
Warhammer Forge type of Famir sculpts. Is that what it was? Like Forge World?
Yeah, so they were. I was working at Games Workshop at the time, so they had for sale through the Forge World website. You could buy the Famir kits. There was also a Famir command group that eventually went up, but in the Games Day previews, there were mock-ups and early sculpts, and at least alphas of Zote Shamans, Zote Shamans and Famir Shamans and a bunch of other stuff, which now that would be pretty interesting because those are projects that just didn't get realized with the end of what was called Warhammer Forge. But that is a super fun place for maybe them to take the Beastmen range. I mean, the Beastmen range is pretty wide. There's loads of kits in there. There's Minotaur. And there's big monsters and there's a bunch of fun stuff, but I reckon that they're going to start getting a bit strange with it. And I think Beastmen's been far enough out as well that they can, because you've got to ask yourself in some of these, why was the order this order? What was the purpose of, was it production times? Was it just they thought this was the right situation? So I think that might be one that might be really interesting for me personally.
It could be cool. And what's been interesting too is that as this is SCS, which is what Forge World sort of became rebranded internally as, they are able to, although they lost access to sort of the AOS main studio sculpts, you can dip into a lot of the creatures that have been created for Warhammer Fantasy over the years. And that is actually one of the areas of Warhammer Forge, which is what Forge World was for fantasy. They had the Monstrous Arcanum.
Oh my God.
And there were lots of different monsters and creatures and things that were sculpted for that range and probably were meant to be sculpted for that range. So who knows? Maybe, you're right. Maybe they go back into the drawers and pull out some cool old stuff.
Cursed I don't know if we're going to see. You fancy a Cursed in?
I don't even know what that is.
It's a two-headed. It's a Monstrous Arcanum. It was a two-headed kind of semi-giant. Again, that was. It feels like that would fit into the Beastmen range really, really well. That could be a vibe. Then you've got things like the elemental spirits, like elemental of beasts and stuff, elemental fire, which wouldn't really apply, I don't think. But also there was, what was it called? So because Mirrorwind is going to be coming out for the High Elves, right? So that's Warhammer Forge as well.
That was strongly suggested that the Mirrorworm was coming back for High Elves, but that was not announced. So
there'll be a wave 2. I think there's going to be a wave 2 of minis for High Elves, definitely. But there was it was like a little stag flying thing. I don't know.
Okay,
we'll have to see. We'll have to see.
There's lots of cool Gribblies in the cabinets that can be drawn on, certainly for Beastmen. So I'm just very curious because the other thing is there's lots of models that seem to have been meant for a Beasts of Chaos AOS reboot that then got diverted into Slaves to Darkness and stuff like that. Like there are what are clearly new Minotaurs that became not Minotaurs. What are they called in AOS?
God, Therodons.
They're not Minotaurs. They're Therodons. So yeah, we'll see what kind of stuff makes its way out for Beastmen. It will be cool, and you're right. There's a lot of opportunity to like really go into the cabinets, and also wacky stuff. Like we've seen the Imperial Ogres, which now that people are starting to actually receive them, are the size of just regular people. Like the same scale as like regular Empire soldiers. They're very tiny, but they're deep from the sort of Citadel Marauder catalog. So we might see some of those types of creatures come from there too.
Shout out to Val, who homework is going to go back and look at his Monsters Arcana book and look up the Praeton. That was the name of what I wanted to show you. You're going to have a great time flicking through that. What could come Beastmen? Then we got Wood Elves, and then Wood Elves being our last of the announced armies that are coming out is super interesting because, as you've said and pointed out, several of the model kits exist in AOS still, specifically the Tree Man kit. In fact, actually, that's one of the few. All of the infantry is no longer in AOS. Wild Riders, Sister of the Thorn, not in Age of Sigmar anymore.
Well, all of the tree spirits are Sylvaneth. So like the Dryads are like
Dryads
are currently AOS. That is the same kit. There's no other kit they could bring out. I can't remember if we've seen them or not in photos of the armies. We have seen the old metal tree man, the branch wraith.
Unfortunately,
these are so like there's stuff that again seems to be locked right now to AOS. So I'm curious to see what maybe there is a compromise and you can buy Dryads as a crossover kit in Old World or in AOS, but I guess that remains to be seen. The worst case scenario, of course, is that maybe there's old metal minis that they trot out instead.
But the core of the Wood Elf range, so your Glade Guard,
actual Wood Elves,
Wood Elves, most of that is going to be absolutely available. Which I think will be really, really cool. Most of those kits also were fairly late. They were updated quite close towards. They were some of the last releases for 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle. So your Wild Riders, your Sister of the Thorns, and they hold up really nice. Super nice. Your Glade Guard, super cool.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. There are some really good sort of core plastics for them, but there's also like weird things in the range, and maybe this is a place where sort of the Forge World resin can fill in. But like, I think the only mounted mage or wizard they have is like absolutely ancient. So I'll be very, very curious to see. One thing we didn't see returning to the High Elves was the Great Eagle. That also wasn't revealed. So Eagles and Warhawk Riders and stuff for Wood Elves would be hopefully returning in, hopefully not metal. Maybe those get remastered into some sort of a resin just because they're very easy. They're very delicate and need to be pinned otherwise.
I have a 1% 1 to 5% likelihood guess as well. So early on in the Old World's release, we saw the map was updated, which got updated again recently as well. We should cover that. But one of the cool things about that was they showcased and specifically wrote where the moot was. Now, if
this was a big deal to you,
this was a big deal to me, because if halflings are going to be bounding around, I don't know if halflings in the Wood Elf bit is a terrible shout. Traveling the pathways, hiding in the forest. I don't know if we don't just see at least some sort of like small, and again, I'm saying 5% chance this is a likelihood, but It's an interesting conversation, at least. If halflings, I don't know why the moot's on the map, Val. I don't know why the moot's on the map, and I need to know.
I mean, it is a critical element of the old world setting. So I'm glad to see it still there. There are vampires on the map too, or at least vampire adjacent houses on the map too. So it might just be there for flavor. Now, I don't want to pour cold water on you, but maybe we'll see them as
devastating,
as a regiment of renown or something like that. But I think if halflings were to have come back, they would have likely have been included with Empire this far anyway. So maybe someday soon.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the little box in the middle is Cathay. We're going to cover that in another video. Yeah, that's what that is, which we've talked about. I just want to say, Square-based, heard it here first, called it.
Yes, absolutely stone cold called it.
Absolutely.
Also, there's other indications that Cathay was coming from many other places too. And by that I mean like things that Games Workshop have said and done. So yeah, Cathay, not a huge surprise for us, but maybe making people out there really, really excited. So I can't wait to talk about that.
We're going to cover that in another video, but because that deserves its own video, really. That's why I wanted to do that. I wanted to put that in its own thing. What I really wanted to talk about was, even with, because High Elves we expect to come out kind of February, March, Beastmen, Wood Elves, and Cathay, let's say that takes us through the whole year, right? Let's say that's what it does. Let's, quote unquote, let's just say, my friend.
I think it takes us through the summer.
Okay, all right. So that puts us, the entire game, or as we know it, is released first year and a half of the edition. So my real question, to you is, and everyone watching at home, what do we think? We talked about, we think we're going to see a second edition kind of January 2026, or at least a 1.5. And to put like cool waters on really hot heads right now, we're talking about really just some editing of the rules versus all your points are different. Yeah, an edit of the rules versus all your points being different and everything. It gives them an opportunity to do another cycle of Arcane journals as well, etc. I think everything from this, I think it'll be a core rule change, and I think everything from Wave 1 or Edition 1 will be viable in Edition 2. So I think. What do you reckon? Or do you think we're going to see a season of campaign books, additional Arcane journals? What do you reckon?
Just based on the vibes of that FAQ, which is really, really struck me as their minds are elsewhere. You've been saying this like very rapid re-release of the core rules for a while now. And to me, something that might blunt the trauma of making people buy a core rulebook, after 2 years, and after it was so hard to get in the first place. Something that might blunt that a little bit would be maybe if it was launched with 1 or 2 brand new factions. And so you kind of get, this has been kind of old world 0.5, this has been the beta, and it does feel that way, so that they could get the factions launched, all that kind of stuff. And then, in 2.0, potentially a year from now, you get, things like Cathay, maybe a Kislev, maybe a Norska. Those are all in the core rulebook, by the way. Factions of the old in the lore section. You get the factions that we've seen released with Arcane journals, plus those 3. So that leads me to suspect those are those quote unquote new standalone factions that might be coming. And would be super cool to see those. And then also provides the opportunity to maybe think twice about excluding a bunch of really, really key factions from the old world, in the form of the legacy factions. So maybe we could see them say, no, here's a new book, and here are the quote legacy factions that we're gonna release. Maybe it's all of them, maybe it's some of them, but it would be great to see, things like vampire counts, Skaven, Lizardmen, especially. Dark elves. I don't see why dark elves aren't already here, because most of those minis aren't being used in AOS. So yeah, I think the future could be bright, and I would actually personally, just games mechanic guy who loves to play the game, I would love to see sort of an edition that goes back and fully bakes the core rules, because I think that for me is the most the biggest out. Like, a lot of people get hung up on the old models, but to me, just the literal core rules, not the Arcane journals. Arcane journals have actually rarely required an FAQ. Like they have been released actually very tight. There's been very little ambiguity with them. The Forces of Fantasy and the Ravening Hordes, very little needed to be FAQ'd or adjusted or answered about those things. All the problems this game has are in its core rules. So a reboot with some new armies, I think that would be sick as hell.
And obviously, we don't know this for sure. I think it makes sense, though. I don't think that the campaign book
unfortunately,
timeline...
it makes too much sense. I think is the problem.
I think that's exactly where we're at, right? Like this is meant to be like a realistic look of like what's happening. I think it would be and another thing I want to shout out as well, especially for Old World fans and for people who like are really understanding the pressure SDS are under. If you imagine the second edition is January, and then they were to bring in all of the legacy factions, I don't know exactly what the product line is for Specialist Design Studio. They have Blood Bowl, they have Necromunda, which gets a million releases all the time. And they've also got Horus Heresy. They've got Lord of the Rings. But I got to say, in under a year and a half, think about that. Anyone who does anything to do with stocks or management, adding 9 separate new lines, 10. We'll talk about that in a bit. 10 new separate lines of huge swaths of models to your section of the business. And then January 2026, we're like, cool, we're going to add in another 9. That's bananas numbers to be added, I would say.
It like just when we were in the lead up to it and they announced the 9 core factions, it's like, oh man, what the heck? And then realizing that they were going to have to dribble out each army as it goes. And everyone was like, oh man, that's lame. And then Bretonia released and Tomb Kings released. And I just kind of understood just how much of a logistical challenge, re-releasing Warhammer Fantasy was, because it was a full, complete game. Yeah, like each one of these. I mean, even though they're old kits, you still got to do all the you got to do all the boxes. You got to put them somewhere. You need the warehousing. Like logistically, it's not surprising that there have been issues around stocking this and having enough to meet demand, because it's a lot on top of everything you just mentioned for this sort of sub studio of Games Workshop. And like any one of the games that you rattled off there is an entire business outside of Games Workshop. Like it is an entire game company's output. And there's probably not the equivalent of 6 other game companies within SDS. This is a tight crew putting out crazy content, and that's not to excuse it, but I would love to see them really focus on upping the quality of the core rules and like also righting some of the wrongs of the original launch, which is squatting some of the most beloved factions in the game.
Okay, so listen, this is maybe more pumped than I was at the start of the video, to be honest. Nice. Because now I'm like, okay, I've got some big question marks around those other 2 releases. Obviously, we're going to talk about Cathay in another video. And then also like, okay, I like the idea that kind of summer towards autumn this year, we might start to get rumors, information, and knowledge about where this game is going to go. Because there has been, like you say, since that initial launch, that question mark, what's going to happen? Some of my favorite armies, ogres, lizardmen, chaos dwarfs, all currently with like an axe over their head, although we as Squarebase have always said we'll do our hardest to support those factions in the future. So like I'd love to see this, and I think really just reminding ourselves of the logistical nightmare of releasing a game this size is pretty wild. So I'm super pumped. That's all I'm going to say.
I just to round that off, I want to remind people when 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy dropped, the brand new edition came out. It came out in probably the usual timeline, somewhere in the summer of, I want to say, 2010. It was March 2011 before the first army book came out.
Wow.
So we now have almost a full game released in almost the same timeline that in the previous edition of this game, they released 1 book. So they're doing a bang up job from just a getting it out the door perspective. And overall, like I said, aside from core world issues, I think the quality is also there. So I think I'm happy to still be square bassed, keeping it bassed for the foreseeable future. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, I think it starts going to get gnarly. So anyway, this has been the timeline. Let us know what you think. about all of these things that we talked about, what you think might see return, if there was any sort of deep, dark, mysterious releases that we didn't touch on. I was happy with the Praeton pick. Doubt we see it, but I'm happy I brought it up. And then, let us know what you're thinking. Val, it's been a great chat. I've really loved this.
Love it.
Yeah, and let us know in the comments. And thanks everyone on the Squarebase Patreon. Thanks everyone on the Twitch chat. You've been great. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.